The Fractured Crown: How Time, Trauma, and Competing Narratives Are Cementing the Royal Rift. The enduring image, once a symbol of tentative hope, now feels like a relic from a different era. Prince Harry, shoulders slightly hunched, walking solemnly behind his father's coffin, flanked by his brother, William, and uncle, Peter Phillips. It was a moment of profound shared grief at the funeral of Prince Philip in April 2021, a moment that sparked a global whisper. Could this be the start of a reconciliation? In the 3 years since, that whisper has been drowned out by a deafening silence, punctuated by explosive public revelations, competing multi-million-dollar media deals, and a palpable hardening of positions. What was once portrayed as a temporary schism of family disagreement that time would heal is now being analyzed by royal experts, biographers, and crisis managers as something far more permanent, a deep, strategic, and possibly irrevocable fracture. The hope for a meaningful healing of the rift between the Sussexes and the House of Windsor is not merely fading. It is, according to a growing consensus, being actively paved over by the concrete of entrenched narratives, institutional survival,
the foundation
and
of the
trauma.
fracture, beyond Megxit. To understand why reconciliation is so elusive, one must move beyond the simplistic Megxit narrative and examine the foundational cracks, which are rooted in fundamentally incompatible worldviews and unmet emotional
Institutional
needs.
imperative versus the humanitarian enterprise. At its core, this is a clash between an ancient institution built on hierarchy, discretion, and the sublimation of the individual to the firm, and a modern Silicon Valley-adjacent ethos of entrepreneurial individualism, therapeutic disclosure, and global humanitarian branding. The royal family operates on a model of never complain, never explain. Its currency is mystique, its survival dependent on public deference and a carefully managed media ecosystem. Harry and Meghan's post-exit strategy, however, is built on a foundation of explaining and complaining as a path to catharsis, control, and commercial success. Their currency is authenticity, their survival dependent on audience engagement and strategic partnerships with platforms like Netflix and Spotify. These are not just different careers, they are diametrically opposed operating systems. For the institution, forgiveness might be extended privately, but trust cannot be restored with individuals who have monetized their private grievances and continue to build their brand in direct, public contrast to the monarchy's
wounds
values.
of the spare. Prince Harry's trauma is not a subplot. It is the engine of the conflict. His memoir's title, Spare, is the thesis statement. Experts in family systems theory note that his narrative of being the backup, the one whose emotional needs were secondary to duty and to the heir's stability, the one whose mother was hounded to her death and whose wife faced similar forces, is not something that can be remedied by a few cordial phone calls. Harry is not seeking an apology for a recent slight, notes a clinical psychologist specializing in familial estrangement. He is seeking a fundamental acknowledgement of a lifetime of perceived neglect and complicity in his pain. He wants the institution, embodied by his father and brother, to say, "The system hurt you, and we, as parts of that system, are sorry." That is an admission the institution is structurally incapable of making, as it would undermine its very
dynamic
foundation.
and the ghost of Diana. Meghan's entry exacerbated existing tensions, but she entered a system uniquely primed to reject a woman who was perceived as too independent, too charismatic, and too unwilling to wait her turn. The parallels drawn between her and Princess Diana, while often simplistic, are potent. Both were seen as outsiders who threatened the status quo by connecting directly with the public and displaying an emotional authenticity the palace struggled to control. For Harry, protecting Meghan became inextricably linked with protecting the ghost of his mother, a psychological imperative of immense power. For the institution, the fear of another destabilizing, media-dominating people's princess narrative likely triggered a defensive bureaucratic rigidity. The alleged unconscious bias and the fights over titles and security were not just administrative. They were, for Harry, symbolic reenactments of past failures.
How actions paved over the path back. The initial separation in 2020 left a narrow path for reconciliation. The subsequent choices by all parties have systematically closed it off. 1. The nuclear option of public revelation. The Oprah Winfrey interview in March 2021 was the point of no return. Allegations of racism within the family, of being abandoned while feeling suicidal, and of character assassination transformed a family feud into a global referendum on the monarchy's morality. It forced a public response, recollections may vary, that entrenched sides. Harry's subsequent media projects, the Netflix docuseries Harry and Meghan, and the memoir Spare, were not just revelations, they were exhaustive, detailed prosecutions. He named names, recounted private conversations, and laid bare his bitterness toward the press, his brother's physical altercation, and his father's perceived inadequacies. You cannot unring these bells, observes a veteran royal correspondent. Every intimate detail sold for a book advance or streamed for a global audience becomes a brick in a wall between you and the family you're describing. It creates a justifiable paranoia.
The monarchy's strategic pivot, the slimmed-down crown. While the Sussexes were building their media empire, King Charles III was executing his long-held vision for a streamlined, cost-effective monarchy centered on the direct line of succession, the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children. The marginalization of Prince Andrew, the calming, dutiful presence of the Princess of Wales, and the consolidation of roles around William and Catherine have been broadly successful with the public. This slimmed-down model has no operational room for the Sussexes as part-time hybrid royals. More critically, it has no emotional room for the drama they bring. The institution has, de facto, moved on. The Waleses represent stability, continuity, and a frosty silence, a keep calm and carry on ethos that is the antithesis of the Sussexes' public journey. This pivot is not passive, it is an active, strategic choice to marginalize the geography
of estrangement. Physical distance begets emotional distance. Life in Montecito, with its different rhythm, culture, and priorities, wellness, tech, conscious living, is a world away from the ceremonial grind of royal life. Harry's children are being raised without the context of weekly lunches with the king or casual playdates with their cousins. Bonds that are not nurtured, especially in early childhood, do not form. The shared experiences that might one day bridge a gap are not being created. The Atlantic Ocean is now a metaphor for a chasm of lived experience. Part 3. The Experts Warn Analysis: Why Fading Hope is Becoming Certainty. The experts cited in these warnings, crisis managers, biographers, historians, point to several converging factors that signal a permanence
of a catalyst for closure. In most familial estrangements, reconciliation is spurred by a catalyst, a health crisis, a wedding, the birth of a child, or a shared tragedy. The funeral of Queen Elizabeth II presented such a moment. The outcome was a study in icy civility. The Wales children's birthdays pass without public acknowledgement from Montecito. King Charles's cancer diagnosis, while prompting a fleeting visit from Harry, did not result in a thaw with William, nor did it pause the promotional rollout for any of the Sussexes' projects. The pattern suggests that future catalysts will be similarly managed, handled with brief, transactional contact, not as openings for healing. The family has become adept at managing the symptoms of the rift without addressing the disease. 2. The entrenchment of competing economic models. The Sussexes' financial independence, once seen as their liberation, is now a barrier. Their lucrative deals depend on them maintaining their unique narrative as truth-tellers who escaped a toxic system. A full, warm reconciliation with the palace would fundamentally undermine their brand equity. Conversely, the monarchy's value is tied to its dignity, continuity, and above all, its ability to command deference. The ongoing drama is a reputational drain. There is no longer a financial incentive for either side to fully reconcile. Their economic models are, ironically, predicated on the rift's existence, or at least on the maintained distinction between their brands. And the role of the media. Trust has been utterly eviscerated. From the palace's perspective, private conversations end up in books or on podcasts. From the Sussexes' perspective, trusted aides leak to the tabloids. This has created a trust desert where no party feels safe to speak openly. The British media, particularly the tabloid press, plays a dual role as both antagonist and essential barrier. It constantly fans the flames of the feud, rewarding each side for taking potshots and ensuring that any minor incident is amplified into a snub or a provocation.
This media ecosystem makes private reconciliation almost impossible, as any gesture is immediately analyzed for public consumption, stripping it of its authenticity. The succession solidifies. The future of the monarchy is unequivocally William V. His approach, disciplined, private, and fiercely protective of his own family unit, shows no indication of a desire for a dramatic detente. His focus is on preparing for kingship, not on managing the Harry and Meghan problem. As William's path solidifies, Harry's role as the rebellious bear becomes permanently etched in the historical record. There is less and less functional or symbolic space for him to return to, even if he wanted to.
What reconciliation could even mean now? Given these realities, we must redefine what healing could plausibly look like. The fantasy of the Sussexes returning as working royals or of cheerful joint Christmas photos at Sandringham is extinct. 1. The managed truce scenario, most likely. This involves a gradual reduction in public hostilities, a cessation of media projects directly targeting the family, and the establishment of a cold but functional diplomatic channel. It would allow for very limited, orchestrated contact at major state events, a future coronation for William perhaps, where roles are strictly defined by protocol, not affection. It is a coexistence, not a reconciliation. It prioritizes the monarchy's stability and the Sussexes' ability to move forward without constant conflict, but it accepts that the intimate familial bond is gone. 2. The pragmatic co-parenting model of the crown. The only enduring link is blood. The focus may eventually shift, minimally, to facilitate a relationship between the king and his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, and perhaps between the cousins. This would be a slow, private, and incredibly fragile process, likely managed through lawyers and neutral intermediaries for years to come. It would be a business arrangement regarding inheritance and titles, not a loving familial
estrangement
dynamic.
trajectory, current path. This is the continuation of the status quo, a frozen conflict. Communication remains minimal or non-existent. The families exist on parallel tracks that rarely and only awkwardly intersect. The narrative battle continues in subtler forms, through favored journalists and strategic public appearances. The rift becomes a permanent footnote in the history of Charles III's reign. Conclusion: the fading not of hope, but of illusion. The warning from experts is not that a loving family has had a falling out. It is that two sovereign entities, one a centuries-old monarchy, the other a globally leveraged commercial and philanthropic brand, have undergone a painful public divorce. Their interests, once aligned, are now divergent. Their stories, once unified, are now that is
competitors.
fading is the hope for a storybook ending. It is the hope that love alone could conquer the deep forces of institution, history, trauma, and commerce. What remains is the messy, gray reality of modern estrangement. Not a clear-cut villain and victim, but a tragic constellation of choices made from irreconcilable perspectives. The walk behind Prince Philip's coffin was not the beginning of the end of the rift. It was perhaps the last performance of the old familial unity before the final curtain fell. The stage is now set for a long, quiet, and separate run for two very different shows.